Hey guys, so today we're going to be looking at how to use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic. Now the quadratic formula is basically a formula that will allow you to solve any quadratic if there is a solution. So if you're not able to use the PSF method or any other methods to factor a quadratic and then solve it, you can always just simply apply or use this formula to help you find the answers. So this quadratic formula is your backup method if you forget all the other methods to find the answers for x which solve a quadratic. So let's look at how it works. Now the quadratic formula is going to be used when we have a quadratic in this form: ax squared plus bx plus c, which equals 0, because we always want this left side to be 0 and we always want the x squared to be positive. But if A isn't positive, that's okay. And B and C might be negative as well. But we will always make the x squared positive before we start using the quadratic formula or before we factor a quadratic if you do a different method. So if we have the quadratic in this form, we want it in this exact order. We want the x squared term first, the x term second, and just the number at the end. We can then find out which values of x will make this left side equal 0 by using this formula. We know that our x answers are going to be given by x equals negative b plus minus, and it's plus minus because there is usually two solutions or two answers if you remember when we factored some quadratics. The square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And that is our formula to solve any quadratic. Now it looks a bit complicated, so I would recommend writing this formula out about 5 times so that you absolutely know it, because it's going to be your backup method to find the answer for any quadratic if you can't use a different method like factoring or completing the square. So let's look at an example to use this. Let's say we have 2x squared minus 5x plus 1 equals 0. Now to start, we check that we've got all our terms on one side and we make sure this x squared term is positive, which it is. Once we have that and we have them in the order of x squared term, the x term, and then the number, we can see that our 2 here is our a, looking up here. Our minus 5 is our b. Don't forget the negative is part of this 5. And we have plus 1 as our c. So we're now going to look at this formula and put these values in to find our x answers. So we know that our x solution is going to be x equals minus 5 plus minus the square root of minus 5 squared, and I'm going to use a bracket with all the negative terms, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 1. And I'm actually going to bracket this 4ac part, if you look here, just so we don't get any of the negatives mixed up if there is another negative in this bracket. So make sure you use brackets wherever you can. We're then going to divide this by 2 times a, which is 2. If we simplify this, we're left with minus 5, which is plus 5, plus minus the square root of 25 minus 8 over 4. And we know that if we further simplify this, we're going to get this equals 5 plus minus the square root of 17 over 4. So that is what our x equals. In other words, the x has two answers. X equals 5 plus root 17 over 4, or x equals 5 minus root 17 over 4. Because we know that this plus minus means that we can have two different answers. And it can be split up like that, or you can leave your answer like this. So these are the two ways that you could write your answer. So that means that if we sub in these two numbers here, given by 5 plus root 17 over 4, or 5 minus root 17 over 4, back into this equation here, if we sub those answers into this x, this will all come out as 0. And that's how you find the solution using the quadratic formula. So let's look at one more quick example. So let's say we have minus x squared minus 6x equals 3. Well, to start off with, we want to make the x squared positive and we want all the terms on one side. So I'm going to move this minus x squared to the other side, and I'm going to move this minus 6x to the other side. To move the minus x squared, it becomes plus x squared. And because we're moving the minus 6x, we have to plus the 6x, and 3 is still on that side, so the 3 is still there. So this is just another way of rewriting this so that we can use the quadratic formula. Now the next step we do is we find out what our a, b, and c are so we can use the quadratic formula. Well, we know that our a here is this invisible 1. We know that our b is plus 6, and we know that our c, which is always the number on the end without an x next to it, is plus 3. So we know that our answer to this quadratic is going to be given by x equals minus 6 plus minus the square root of b squared, which is 6 squared, minus 4ac, which is 4 times 1 times 3. And that's all over 2 times 1, which is 2a. Remember, in our formula was given by minus b plus minus root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So I've just put those values into there, and that is going to equal minus 6 plus minus the square root of 36 minus 12 over 2, which is going to equal minus 6 plus minus the square root of 24 over 2. And before we finish up here, we can see that our root 24 actually can be split up as a surd. We can break this surd down. So always remember this, that if a surd is not fully simplified, we need to fully simplify it. So what can our root 24 be written as? Well, we can rewrite it as minus 6 plus minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 6, because root 4 times root 6 equals root 24, as we know with our surd laws. And that is all going to be over 2. So after we do that, we're going to get minus 6 plus minus, and we know that root 4 is 2 root 6 over 2. And we can see here that on the top, we have a common factor of 2. So we can't just cancel out this 2 and this 2. You can never do that, because you can only cancel out once you have a factor of both of these terms taken out of the brackets. So we know that if we factorize 2 here, we're going to be left with, or we can take out minus 2 if it's easier, and minus 2 times 3 equals minus 6, and we're going to still have our plus minus root 6 over 2. And we know from here that now, because this minus 2 is times in this whole bracket, we are now allowed to cancel them out. And we're left with our answer of minus 3 plus minus root 6, and we can expand this out to minus 3 plus minus root 6. And that they are our two answers, because we could have minus 3 plus root 6 or minus 3 minus root 6. So that's how you use the quadratic formula to solve any quadratic. So remember that is our backup method when we can't factor them or we can't complete the square. And we're going to look at completing the square in the next video, which is our third and final option for solving a quadratic.